really loving, really good boy, loved school, loved sport, didn't give me any problems at all. I was very lucky. We had a bit of an unconventional family life because I was on my own with Mark, but my sister lived with me, my younger sister, and my younger brother was there a lot. So we were kind of all together. It was just a really happy childhood. He was always a caring boy. Everybody used to come to our house. It was like, and he'd always invite children round that he'd say, nobody plays with him, and can he come round? And he just had a good heart. I had a really lovely time with Mark. I loved being his mum. Yeah, it was lovely.
Lovely. So what was your relationship like with Mark before gambling?
Really, really close relationship. I think when you're on your own with your children, the bond is very deep, and we had fun together, as well as, you know, I was quite a disciplinarian in the fact about his behaviour and his manners and how he treated other people. But we had a lot of fun. I trusted him implicitly. I was proud of him. I used to come back from parents' evening, and they'd say what a lovely lad he was, and how maybe he might not have been as studious in class, but he was certainly into his sport, and he was great with the other pupils, and he'd do anything for the school. So I was always a very proud mum, and I trusted him, and he was very open and honest with me. And then that started to change. I saw a difference in him. He's secretive, not looking me in the eye, telling me all these things. So things changed, and I felt over time that I was grieving for the loss of that relationship that I had with my son.
So what point did you realise things were changing and you started becoming worried about Mark's gambling?
Well, I feel ashamed to say this, but I honestly did not realise that he was gambling. And at the time, ironically, I was a nurse in substance misuse, working with children that were addicted to substances, working with families. I thought I really knew how to be and how to know these things. All I knew is that my son was really unhappy, anxious, hypervigilant. I remember going to the shops with him, and I'd turn round and he'd gone. And I'd look round and he'd gone. And he'd seen somebody in a car that he owed money to, and he'd just run. He didn't used to even say, Mum, I have to go. And I used to think, so later on I go, where were you? Really bizarre behaviour. And I've always been able to leave money around the house, anything, never had to worry. And then I started thinking, I'm losing my marbles here, things are going missing. And then one day I was going out and I went to put my jewellery on, and all my jewellery had gone. I didn't have a lot of jewellery, but what I had wasn't there. And he admitted that he'd pawned my jewellery. And I was just shocked. It was like, I can't believe my son would do that to me. You know, I've brought him up on my own. I've given him everything he's needed when we've had nothing. How could he do that? And it was just really shocking for me and hurtful. And then he'd get angry with me and say, want money, and say, you need to get it. Okay, then you'll not see me again because I'm going to get killed now, and that'll be your fault, and you've not given me the money. And he was desperate. He just completely changed. I just lost him.
So when did you realise about the gambling addiction?
Gosh. I feel it were actually another woman who said to me, do you not think he's a gambler, Carmel? He's showing all them traits. And it hit me like I thought, I could see it then. The lack of money, the losing money, people after him. And we spoke about it, and he said he admitted it. And then I tell you, I was so shocked how it had got to that over years, and how did I not know for all that time? Because they're so secretive. they lie, and they become so proficient at lying, and they're so earnest about it, and you know what it is as well, you want to believe your children that there is an explanation why this is happening, or there is that why they've not got money, that they have lost it, like and it's always somebody else's fault and it's not them. And I think in a way, then when I knew, it was almost like I could look back and think all these signs and symptoms had been happening for a long time. His personality change, his anxiety, his depression. And at that early time I looked into Gordon Moody, but it was years before he actually did go to Gordon Moody, because he had to do it on his own at the end. You can't force somebody to stop. They've got to want it. And I think Mark got that desperate that he did at the end.
So obviously you spoke about your relationship with Mark before he started gambling. How was your relationship during Mark's addiction?
Well, when it got to the point where he'd owed so much money to loan sharks, who'd then sell the debt to people that were nasty, I couldn't believe that he was putting me and the family at risk, because they were coming round to the house, and then Mark would be saying, "Mum, if you don't get me the money, this is going to happen." And they were threatening me, and they said, "Oh, I know you're in the house with the kids." And do you know what I felt? And it's awful to say this, I felt like I hated him at times for putting us through it and throwing away everything that he'd had as a child. And it's funny, when your children are going through that as young adults, all you think about is when they were little, growing up, and all them times when you were, how happy you were. You see the life flash before your eyes, and then you think, how's my child got to this? I mean, he was suicidal, he was desperate, and I were angry, I were heartbroken, I loved him, I hated him, I were everything. When I look back, I needed help myself, but at the time, there were nothing out there for parents, certainly not. It was more like, I went to GAM care, and they just talked about the husbands had done this and their husbands, and I used to think, but it's your child, you can't turn your back on your child. And I facilitated it a lot, the gambling, because I was getting money and I was taking loans out and I was borrowing, and I was trying to buy time for him all the time because I thought somebody were going to hurt him. But I realised it wasn't the right thing at the time, but you're desperate when you're a mum.
So kind of following on from that, how do you think, expanding on it, you coped during that time?
Do you know what, when I look back, I don't think I did. I can be honest with you, I used to go home and get a bottle of wine, and I used to drink. And even Matt used to go mad and go, "Mum, what are you having a drink for?" And I used to be self-medicating. And it's easily done when you're stressed. I was fortunate that I had a good set of friends at work. I was working in an environment where there were a lot of parents suffering with their children with issues. So I had a lot of empathy around me. And I think I was carried, when I look back, I was carried by my friends at that time. But I wouldn't say I was carried by my family, and that's a sad thing, because everybody started turning because he couldn't understand what Mark was doing. He'd borrowed off them, he'd fell out with them, he'd burnt his bridges. But that impacted on me because I then was isolated from my family. I look back and I think I were in a bad place when I look back, really bad. But I was, just because I had to go to work every day, I did, and carried on.
When do you think things started to change for the better?
Well, initially, it got to the point where I felt like we were all at risk and we were all in danger, including the children, and he was just desperate all the time, and there were more, it were escalating, he got kidnapped, and I felt every time I went out, everybody, I was hyper-vigilant myself and frightened, and Mark then made that decision to go to Gordon Moody in the Midlands, to the rehab, and part of that treatment was that you didn't really associate with your family in that time, you had to look at yourself, and we had a distance. I didn't see him for 6 months, 12 months, And it was like a grief, because I didn't know, I still felt he were angry with me because I'd turned my back on him. As I said, I can't do it anymore. So it was, but when he came out of Gordon Moody, he got his first flat. He was still living in that area because he needed that support so much from them. We started building our bridges, and I knew it just changed, and we started building it, but it took a long time, and I still get upset now, and it's 9 years ago, but it was such a big part of my life at the time. And I wish there'd been something out there for me at the time, like peer support from other parents. I think that's the thing. I think it's different when it's your child. I'm not saying it's not. It's hard when your loved ones, your husbands, but there's something about your children as a mother. It's harder to me. I don't know.
So what's it like today with Mark?
Oh gosh, it's unbelievable. It's like old times. We've all got, I mean, it's even coming today and talking to him today, it's made me feel like, God, we've come so far. We couldn't have had that conversation a few years ago without both of us getting defensive, or Mark saying, yeah, but you didn't do that, and I'd say, yeah, but you did that. And now we both understand. I didn't understand about the addiction, even though I was a substance misuse nurse. I didn't know. I was having to find out. There was not the awareness. And thankfully now we're getting to know about it, and you can talk about it, and it's out there, and it's the best thing to talk about it. And the more of us that do that, we'll realise we're not on our own, and that it can happen to anybody's child, anybody's family member, and they're not bad people. They're just people that've got an addiction, and it brings the whole family need help. And I just think you should just think there is hope, and I'm living proof, and Mark is. So please don't give up.
So following on from that last question, what advice would you give to someone going through the same thing?
Again, I think I'd reach out. I mean, as far as I know, like WhysUp kind of do a lot of things with supporting families. I think it's looking at family support. It's not just about getting the gambler into a good place, because all the family will have been dragged down, and it's about having an open conversation. And if you can go to anything that will support you with that, or peer-to-peer support, or get in touch with other parents, I think that's your key, because then you do not become isolated and defensive and inward, and you'll benefit the young person better, your family member. It's to talk about it is the thing.